I'm going to say some things about a beloved Christmas carol that may change the way you listen to it forever. It's a melody that sounds peaceful and gentle, but it was born in a world that was anything but. I'm Stephanie Allen, and this is Dead Canadians Carved in Stone. And today, we're going to look at the history and the mystery of the Huron Carol, the life and death of the man behind it, and the long, messy journey of memory, faith, and legacy. Every holiday season, the air fills with familiar, polished pop Christmas songs. But amid all the fake sleigh bells, there's always one piece of music that feels like it comes from another world entirely. A carol that doesn't sparkle so much as linger. That's the Huron Carol. Listeners today often only hear its gentleness, and they imagine a story told by the fire in the hush of winter. But behind it, the world was in upheaval. It was composed in the 1640s when the Wendat territory was under enormous strain. Long-standing political relationships within the Confederacy were shifting. Alliances with the French brought both opportunity and profound risk. Into that landscape arrived missionaries like Jean de Brébeuf, men who carried sincere admiration for the people they lived among, and an equally sincere conviction that their own cosmology should replace the one that was already there. This is the world in which Brebéuf lived, worked, and ultimately died. It's the world that shaped the Huron Carol, a song crafted from the Wendat language, Christian narrative, and Brébeuf's attempt to translate one universe into the imagery of another. The carol's not simply a piece of music, it's an artifact. It balances colonial tension, personal affection, spiritual ambition, and cultural collision. Two worldviews intertwined, creating moments of understanding and paths to ruin. Brébeuf admired the Wendat with a respect that was uncommon for Europeans at the time. He studied their language meticulously, praised their oratory, and lived within their communities. He listened, observed, and learned. But he also believed their beliefs needed replacing, and that the only path to salvation was through his own faith. His attempt to express Christian theology in the Wendat language reflects both genuine admiration and profound cultural imposition. Compassion and condescension moved together. Respect and paternalism were braided together in his work. And the purpose of this episode is to follow that braid, to trace not only the origins of the Huron Carol, but the life of the man who created it, the people who sheltered him, and the long, tangled memory that followed his death. The burning of Ste-Marie, the movement of Brébeuf's bones, and the scattering of his relics across continents. But at the center of this story stands Brébeuf himself, saint, scholar, missionary, and witness to a collapsing world. He's inseparable from the colonial machinery that shaped his legacy. History doesn't offer tidy saints, it offers people. And the Huron Carol is the legacy of one such person. Jean de Brébeuf was born on March 25th, 1593, in a small town in Normandy, France. He was born to minor nobility and given an education and a path into the church. He entered the Society of Jesus in 1617. He was drawn to their intellectual rigor and their insistence that faith demanded action. Illness nearly ended his vocation before it even began. Tuberculosis weakened him so severely that many doubted he could travel overseas to fulfill his mission. Yet he persevered. He was ordained in 1622 or 1623 and soon joined France's growing colonial ambitions. Brébeuf arrived in New France in 1625. Early accounts describe him as earnest and surprisingly tolerant. By 1626, he joined the Wendat mission, a sophisticated confederacy spanning the Great Lakes. He entered cautiously, fully dependent on their hospitality. He spent much of his early missionary life observing and listening. The Wendat were great orators, whose public speech carried great moral authority. Their towns were fortified, and their longhouses sheltered extended families. councils balanced clan, village, and Confederacy interests. Brébeuf embraced enculturation, expressing Christian ideas using indigenous symbols, rhythms, and cosmologies. It was sincere, though not equal. His linguistic work and sensitivity to Wendat oratory led him to the creation of the Christmas hymn in the Wendat language. We now call that carol the Huron Carol, and it was one man's attempt to bridge two worlds. He admired Wendat courage, generosity, and eloquence, yet he also saw them as a people in need of salvation. In 1639, Brébeuf established Ste-Marie Among the Hurons, a mission headquarters on Wendat land. It wasn't a fortress, but it was a cultural hinge, a place of trade, conversation, diplomacy, and Jesuit ambitions for conversion. It was a place where European-introduced diseases spread with devastating speed. By the 1640s, epidemics were fracturing Wendat communities and weakening traditional leadership structures. Brébeuf recorded this suffering, but he never fully grasped how his presence contributed to that crisis. Jean de Brébeuf's death is told differently depending on who is doing the telling. Jesuit accounts emphasize his sanctity and courage, a man enduring unimaginable torture with a prayer on his lips. Wendat oral histories remember the collapse of their confederacy and their world, with Brébeuf being one figure among thousands who were lost. Haudenosaunee accounts frame him as an enemy within a reshaping world. And modern historians, we try to weave these perspectives together. On March 16, 1649, he and fellow Jesuit Gabriel Lallemant were captured on a raid on a Wendat village near St. Louis. They were subject to prolonged ritualized torture, which I will not go into in any great detail, but suffice to say, Brébeuf's death was violent. But in the cosmology of the time, it was not senseless. The Haudenosaunee believed that by consuming the courage of their enemy, they absorbed their power. And for the Jesuits, this violence became proof of Brébeuf's sanctity. After his death, Brébeuf's body did not pass quietly into the earth. Wendat Christians and Jesuits returned to gather his remains and take them back to Ste. Marie, which was soon to be abandoned. He was buried without monument or marker. A short while later, Jesuits exhumed his body. The bones were dried, wrapped, and transported to Quebec, and the flesh was removed and buried within the chapel walls at Ste. Marie. Only his flesh remained there. His bones were divided and crossed vast distances, from Quebec City to France to Rome. Pieces of Brébeuf left the land where he lived and died, becoming sacred relics in places he had never known. Poignantly, his skull returned to Midland, near the historic site of Ste. Marie, and is enshrined today at the Martyr Shrine at Ste. Marie Among the Hurons, which is now both an archaeological site and a reconstruction. There's a shrine rising above the Wye River, which is part pilgrimage site, part monument, and part tourist destination. The hymn that would outlive Brébeuf was not born in a cathedral, but in the winter forests of Wendake. Sometime in the 1630s or 1640s, Brébeuf composed a Christmas carol in the Wendat language, an attempt to translate a Christian story into imagery that would resonate with the Wendat world. It opens with a nativity, not in Bethlehem, but on a frozen northern shore. Brébeuf was building a bridge between worlds. He was using Wendat cosmology as scaffolding, into which he wove a Christian narrative. The Huron Carol is both a theological bridge and a cultural hybrid. It's an act of respect and replacement. Wendat words carried the cadence, metaphors, and structures of speech. Brébeuf's language was the path into their hearts and minds. It was not a decoration, it was a tool. And embedded in this translation was the missionary aim to draw the Wendat towards Christianity by meeting them on familiar ground. The hymn blends Wendat and biblical imagery. It was created with an affection for the Wendat language, the people and their storytelling, but it was framed within the colonial mission, whose ultimate goal was transformation. The best-known English version begins with the line, 'Twas in the moon of wintertime. But that was not written by Brebéuf. It was written by Jesse Edgar Middleton in 1926, nearly 300 years later. Middleton could not read Wendat, and he never saw Brébeuf's manuscript. The lyrics, though poetic and beloved, are his romanticized version of the story. The melody itself is often described as traditional, though its origins are debated. Some scholars hear echoes of French folk tunes filtered through Jesuit ears. And yet the version most Canadians know today bears only a passing resemblance to the original. Yet the song survives. It's sung in schools, churches, concerts, even at the martyr shrine itself. It tells not only the story of Christ's birth, but also the tangled history of cultural exchange and colonial pressure. There's no doubt that the Huron Carol is beautiful, but complicated. Jean de Brébeuf was canonized in 1930 alongside 7 other missionaries who were known collectively as the Canadian Martyrs. The Catholic Church celebrates him as a model of courage and evangelization. But many Indigenous scholars place him within the larger colonial frame that contributed to the collapse of their world. Both perspectives are true, but neither one tells the whole story. Brébeuf's writings remain invaluable sources for 17th century life, yet they carry the biases of his Jesuit mission. The Huron Carol survives as his gentlest legacy, a moment of artistic tenderness created in a time of fear and uncertainty. The hymn has outlived him, Ste. Marie, the mission, and the colonial world that made it possible. History, like faith, is never simple. It's a tangle of belief, power, courage, and consequence. And in that tangle, Brébeuf stands as both saint and symbol, one of our earliest and most complicated dead Canadians.